Hello friends, welcome back to our YouTube channel DS Tech Mirror. Topic for today video is connected web part in SPFx or how to pass data between SPFx web part. If we go a little back to a time when we used to create server side visual web parts, at, at that time we used to create the connected web parts, but now with time we are creating client side web parts. So now in this video we will see how we can connect our client side web part, that is SPFx web parts. This is a very common requirement where there is a need to pass data from one SPFx web part to another SPFx web part. In this video, we will be doing a hands-on where we will create two web parts. In one web part, I will be creating a drop-down in which I will populate all the lists and libraries present in my site collection. There would be another web part which would be displaying all the items present in that particular list which I have selected in the drop down. So what I will be doing, as soon as user will select any list, that means on the change of a drop down, I will pass that list title to my another web part which will use that list title, and using REST API will fetch all the items present in that particular list and will display the items. So in this way I will try to teach you how we can pass data between the web parts or how we can connect the web parts in SPFx. So let's get started. So guys, before starting with the SPFx connected web part, I won't say it's a complicated process, but definitely there are certain steps involved in this complete SPFx connected web part. So there are a number of steps or number of things which we have to do. So I would request you to to observe things carefully to make life easier. What I have done, I tried to add most of the things or most of the steps in a serial way in these slides. First I will take you through the theoretical concepts, and then we'll start with the hands-on. And while implementing the hands-on, I will try to follow these slides as much as I can. And if in the way, if I feel if I missed anything, if I forgot to add anything in this slide, I'll do that there itself. So let's get started now. In this video, what I will do, as I told you, we will be creating two web parts. What I will be doing, I will be calling one web part as the source web part, which will pass the data, and the other web part which will use the data or consume that web part, I will be calling it as a consumer web part. First concept of the SPFx web part is dynamic data. So if we have to pass data between two web parts, that will be accomplished by using dynamic data. What it is, how it is, we will see in this video. Now what I have done, I have I have divided my steps into two categories. Steps what we have to do in the source web part, and the steps what we have to do in the consumer web part. So first we will cover what we have to perform in the source web part. In the source web part, what we have to do, as I told you, we will be using dynamic data. For that, first of all, I will be importing iDynamic data callable, which is an interface, and iDynamic data property definition from Microsoft SP Dynamic Data. In the source web part, I have to implement this iDynamic callable interface, and to use that I have to import this statement. That's it. It's as simple as that. Moving further, so once I implement this iDynamic callable interface, another important thing is, after implementing the interface, it is mandatory to write these two methods. So once you implement the iDynamic callable interface in your source web part, it will start giving you an error if you will not add these two methods, that is get property definition, get property value. So I have to add these two methods. These are very simple methods. The purpose of this get property definition method is nothing, just to I have to add the properties which I will be passing from my source web part. In my current scenario, in my hands-on, I will be passing the list title. In real-time scenario, there you may need to pass more than one property. So over here, what you have to do, you have to just add those properties. Whatever name you want to give, you can give them. In my case, I have given that ID would be title, and then title would be title. For example, tomorrow I might be passing any location, so I will say ID is location, title is location, or I can say I am passing employee name, ID employee name, or I can give a different ID as well, and title would be employee name. So this is just I have to add the definition of the property which my source web part is going to pass. Next method is get property value. This is also nothing, it just in this we will pass the value based on the property. So over here, I have put a small sample over here. uh, if property id is equal to title, written this dot title. Now you might be thinking, what is this written this dot title? So once we'll start the hands-on, everything will get clear. Over here, important thing is, first step, implement iDynamic callable interface. Second, implement these two, not implement, add these two methods, get property definition, get property value. And after that, now how my SPFx would be knowing that this web part is my source web part? For that, what we had to do, apart from implementing the interface, I have to write the on init method, and in that I have to register it as a source using this dot contacts dot dynamic data source manager dot initialize source. The moment I'll write this line, that will tell the SPFX framework that this web part is my source web part and it is going to pass some data, and there would be some consumer web part. After that, I have to write a method to pass the value on a trigger. So that I will show you on a hands-on, but if I have to explain you in short, what do I mean by this line? That means when I select any list title from the drop down, that will trigger the on change event. So I have to write a method on that on change event, and I have to pass the list title. So that method I have to write. That's it. And in that I will be storing that into some variable, and in this get property value, this is that variable which I am returning. It is as simple as that. If you are still confused, don't get worried. We will cover each and everything in detail, and I promise you at the end of this video you will be comfortable with each and everything. Okay, now come to the consumer web part. In the consumer web part, what we will do, we will absorb the value which my source web part will pass using dynamic property, and this dynamic property we will use in web part properties. So we have to import this dynamic property. After importing this, as I mentioned over here in my slide, this dynamic property would be the key in consumer web part. Then I will be adding one property in the web part properties interface, to grab that value. In my case, it would be title, because my source web part would pass that title. So I'm saying I will create one property of type dynamic property. Then I have to add this method to serialize the data. So in this web part, we are doing nothing. Whatever the value we are receiving, we are simply serializing it. So for the purpose of serializing the data, I would be adding this method. Then I would be adding this code in the web part property pane. Over here, I will be using this property pane dynamic field set, and I'm quite sure right now you would be very confused with the consumer web part. But the purpose of taking you through these slides is to register few technical words in your brain, like dynamic data, property pane, dynamic field set, then dynamic property, registering the source web part, consumer web part, all these things. And now what I will be doing, I will be starting with the demo, and then with you I will follow these slides and will implement it. For the demo purpose, what I have done, I have already created this demo, but over here I have not implemented the concept of the connected web part. Let me show you what this web part is doing right now. Let me simply run the gulp serve. So now my gulp serve is running, and let me refresh my SharePoint workbench. In this there are two web parts. These are, over here you can see, this is my name source web part, and this is my another web part called consumer web part. Now these two are independent web parts which I have created in the same solution, but right now there is no connection between them. You can see in my first web part, source web part, this is a drop down which is pulling all the list and libraries name present in my POC site collection, whereas this is my another web part. Right now This is showing, displaying me all the values of the title column present in my list name. So list name right now I have hard coded it. My target is, so whenever I select any list title from here, it should pull the title column, or it should pull the values of the title column from that particular list. So that connection we are going to establish. Just to keep this video short, I have already implemented this thing, because all these things I have already explained or covered in my earlier videos, which are part of SharePoint framework playlist. But side by side I will explain you what I have done. So let's start with the source web part first. So if you're not aware how to create two web parts in the same solution, what you have to do is just create your first web part using the usual step, and once everything is done, run yo @Microsoft/SharePoint once again, and it will create the second web part in the same solution. Nothing special we have to do. So let me start with the source web part. In the source web part, so over here you can see what I am doing. I am just passing the context, and in the component file, this is my drop down. I am appending all the list title which I am fetching in the component did mount method using REST API. So I have covered the basis of React, basis of SharePoint framework, how to use the drop down, everything in my earlier videos. So in this video, let's start with the connected web part concept. So if I go to my PPT, first thing is I have to implement the iDynamic callable interface. This is my web part file, webpart.ts file. Over here I can see this is my class source web part, extend base client side web part. Over here I will say, because I have an interface, I will say implements iDynamic. Now it will not give me the IntelliSense, so let me see iDynamic callable, because I have to at the top import these two statements over there, iDynamic data callable. So let me import it, import iDynamic from @Microsoft slash sp hyphen dynamic data, but I have to implement, yes, same sp hyphen dynamic data. Over here I have to implement iDynamic data callables. Second one I will import when I will need it, so that you are less confused. So over here I have to implement iDynamic data callable. So now I have implemented the interface, and over here you can see the error, and in the error it is saying get property definition and get property values missing. So as I told you, we will implement these two functions as soon as we implement the interface. So now let's go forward and write these two functions. Public get, you will get the IntelliSense, get property definition. If you're not getting, that means we have forget some import. Let me try again. Inside the class I have to do, okay, so I'll say public get property definitions, and its return type is read only array. Okay, I want to show you one more thing also, because see, when I type this get property definition, over here you can see the return type read only iDynamic data property definition. It's an array. You remember this keyword iDynamic data property definition, because the same thing we are importing over here. If I go to previous slide, iDynamic data property definition, so it should be clear by which and why we are importing each and every library. It should be clear. We should not cram things just for the sake of it. So get property definition, return type, let me just import it also at the top, so that it should give me an IntelliSense iDynamic data property definition. And over here now data type would be read only array of type iDynamic data property definition. So this is fine. If it is something, okay, it should return a value, that's fine. I'll say return and it will return me an array. So it is fine. Now I have still the error, because I have to implement my get property value. So instead of writing something in it, first let me create the design of these functions. Get property value, get property value, and the return type for this is over here is of type, what we want to return it. So what I want to pass. First of all, let me tell you, I want to pass the title of the list. So for that, let me create the model of it. What I'll say, export interface I list, and I want to pass the list title. Let's say title, and it should be of type string. This is I want to pass. I am creating an interface because in future if I want to pass something else also, I will use the same interface now. So over here what I am saying is, I can copy here also, from here also, but I want to type so that you can understand in a much better way. iList is my interface, and over here I will return. So this is also fine. Now the basic definition is ready. I will come to these two functions, what we are doing, why we are doing. But before that, what we have done, we have implemented this iDynamic data callable, and then it would started giving us error, these two methods. Before that, I have to register it, as a source inside my init method. So I'll say public, as I mentioned over here, public on init, and it will not return anything. So I'll say public on init will return me a void promise, and inside this, what I will do, I will register it as a source. Before that, let me resolve this promise. So this is fine, and now I'll say this dot contacts dot dynamic data provider or dynamic data source manager. Let's see, dynamic data source manager dot dynamic data source manager dot, and even if you want to see the definition of this method is, dynamic data provider was returns the dynamic data provider associated with the component, and dynamic data source manager returns the dynamic data source manager associated with the component. So dynamic data source manager dot initialize source, and in this I'll say what is the source. This component is my source. So now I have registered this web part as a source, where who will supply the value. Now the important thing is to provide values for these two methods. Now what I have to, what I want to pass, I want to pass the title. So for that, what I have to do, I have to tell the as the method name is explaining get property definition, I have to just provide the value of the or I should say name of the property which I will pass. So it's over here what I'll say, the ID of my property which I will pass would be title, and the title is again the title, because I want to pass the list title. That's it, nothing. And again get property value in this, but still we have not we have not written any method which will give us value. So now the basic is done. Now what my condition is, if I go to in my workbench, whenever I select any value from this drop down, it should pass it. So first of all, I should capture this list title on click of a drop down, that is drop down change event. So first we'll do that. So to work with drop down, what I will do, I will go over here. This is my drop down, and over here I have to write a method on the drop down change event to capture the value. Fine. So first write a method which we will call on this change event. So I'll again go over here and I will write another method which will pass the value. So I'll say what we want the title only. So over here I will write public get title is my method name, and I will create it as an arrow function. Return type would be void. So in this, what I will do, in this method over here I will get the title of my list of type this interface or model which we have created over here, because if I want to pass multiple things I can add over here, and it would be of type iList only. And here what I will do, just to capture the value in the class, let me create one property called public list title, and it will be it should be of type I should say, okay, I will create the type as iList only, because that's the type. Fine, this is fine. Now I'm saying I will get the title and I will assign this title to the property which we have created. So I'll say list title is equal to title which will pass. This is done, and the last thing which we have to do, the moment drop down selects the value, it will pass this value, and we have to notify the SharePoint framework that the property has changed. Then only consumer web part will automatically receive that value. So to that, what we have to do, this dot contacts dot dynamic data source manager dot, over here you can see notify property changed. And which property is changed? Title, because there could be multiple values which we are passing. For example, if you are passing location, then at the time of providing location value, we have to provide we have to mention that this time location value is changed. Now this is done. Now we have to call this method on drop down change event. How we are going to do that? Because that is present in my component file and this is my TS file. Again, with the help of properties. This is one of the concept of the React. So over here, what I will do, I will create one property in the iSource props interface, and I will name this property as pass list title. What it will be the type? It is of type method. Again, that method I will be providing the, you can say I will be providing the title, and then it will not return anything. This is done. Just let me check the auto import, because sometimes it creates issue for me. This looks fine. And now the moment I'll create a property over here, in the component over here, I'm getting an error where I'm calling my component. So I have to this mention pass. Let me copy it from here. It would be easy for me. I'll say pass list title. Let me close this consumer file because we are working. I don't know if I've done some changes in it or not. Let's move save. Okay. Source, this is fine. Let me copy pass list title, copy over here, pass list title. I have to provide the properties, and I will be calling a method with this dot saying get title. This is fine now. Okay, it's giving me an error. Let me see why. And guys, as I was saying, this auto import sometimes create problem for me. So over here you can see my this property, this this interface ilist, it is present in my source file, because over here I created this interface. Over here I created somewhere, this is the interface which I created at the top, and it is consuming it from the consumer file, so which is wrong. So let me remove it. Now it will give me an error. Quick fix. It should import from source web part. This is fine, and because of this, error was also coming. So now this is also got fixed because everything was fine. So what we did, using properties, we are passing this method to the component file. Now I will go to the component file here, and I will say on change event. I will write on change event over here, and I will say on change is equal to this dot props dot pass list title. Okay, some error again, because what it is saying, type ilist is not assignable, property title is missing, the expected times come from property on change which is declared over here. So for that, just go to this property to always, if you want to fix these type of error, just go to F12, click on property, and you can see this is the method which it is expecting, which is of type event, and over here it is providing the value which will get selected in the option. You will always get the value which you will select in the drop down on change. So I have to write this method first over here. Okay, over here I will write this method. I'll go back on the on change. I'll say public on list title change, and here it was giving us the first parameter is of type event and second is of the option. So I'll say and second I will say option, it will give me. And this is the method it was expecting, and here I will write everything else. So whenever you get error, just try to fix it in a structured way instead of going haywire. So that's why I because the first thing which will click in your brain is on change. I have passed it to property. Let's call it directly over here. So I called it over here and started giving me an error because on change it is expecting a method of with a certain signature. So for that I did this. Now it is clear over here. Now what we do again, it should be an arrow function because then we don't have to bind it. So this is my arrow function. It will not return me anything. So this is fine. And inside this, what I will say, I will call that particular method, and method is this dot props dot pass list title. And now I have to pass the list title, the selected one which is present inside this option. So I have to just pass it from here. I will pass this method from here, which is this dot on list title change. Now this is also fixed. Now this dot pass list title is expecting certain value. So to fetch that, what I'll say, and it will take value of type ilist. Okay, just remember that. So I'll say let list title, it's of type ilist. Be careful with the auto import of Visual Studio. Again, it is again importing from the wrong file. This is fine for me. And now if I'll pass this list title over here, see, my error got fixed. It just now it is blank over here. It is undefined over here. I have to pass the value and I have got the value over here. So what I'll say, what I'll do is list title is equal to value is present in option, sorry, for me value is present in option dot text. And how I came to know that it is present in option dot text, what I did is I just logged this into the browser console and I checked this object. I will show you also. So now all the things in my source web part is done. Let me explain you what I did. I open my TS file in which is my source file. I implement iDynamic callable interface. I implement iDynamic data callable interface. To do that, I imported it from this SPDynamic data library. Once I imported, it is giving me error that you have to add two methods called get property definition, get property value. This is my get property definition. In this, I'm just telling my SharePoint framework this is the name of the property which I'm going to pass, because while fetching the value I will be using it. So now this is empty. So now let me use it. So what I'm saying is if, and from here I'll get the property name also, or I will use property ID colon string type. So over here I'm saying if property ID is equal to title. So what it has to return? It has to return which at the top we have list title. And if we are passing multiple properties, so again inside, or I will write a switch method or switch statement inside, and based on the title I will be passing the value. That's why we need this property ID, and from here we are binding it. So what I was saying, initially what I did, I simply create this implement this iDynamic data callable. For that I import it from Microsoft SPDynamic data. Then I write these two methods, get property definition, get property definition. What this method is doing, in this method I'm notifying my SharePoint framework the ID of my property which I will pass, get property value. In this, simply based on property ID, if it is title, but whichever property ID is updating, because we have written one method in which I'm telling the SharePoint framework the title got changed. So immediately consumer web part will call this method and it will pass the ID also. Okay, I want title, so based on that it will pass the value. So these two are done. Then the only thing was, when we select any value in the drop down, we have to simply pass that value. For that, what I did, I simply write this method title and I'm passing it, and I'm calling it from my component drop down. So in this, on change, already I'm getting the value option, and from here using properties I'm passing this value to this method, and it is receiving it over here and storing it in this, and then in get property value we are returning. So this is the flow of the source web part. My source web part is completely ready. We have done everything whatever is required in my source web part. Even if I go to my again component file, although I'm repeating everything again and again, because why I'm doing that, because once we'll implement this consumer web part you might get confused. So I just want to fix things in your mind. For example, I will leave this import statement, this callable implementing done, then get property definition done, get property value done, registering done. The only thing which I skipped over here is the method which using which I am storing this value, because this will change from scenario to scenario. For example, tomorrow maybe on a click of a any statement, or maybe on click you want to pass any value. For example, you have any grid, and whenever you select any row from that particular you will want to pass certain value. So at that time it won't be drop down change event, it will be something else. So based on that you have to write on your own. So this thing you have to remember, that, and there could be multiple ways to pass that value. This is just one of the way, but this thing would be common, that you have to notify this thing have to come in. And let me add this in the in my slide also, that you have to add it, and let me highlight this also, that you have to notify that property got changed. And another thing was, like on inet you have to register it as a source. This is my on inet method. So these are the few steps. I won't say a complicated step, but these are the simple steps, although number of steps are more, but these are the steps which you have to do to register your web part as a source web part. Now your source web part is ready. Now you have to work with your consumer web part, how you will consume that data. Let's get started with the consumer web part. Guys, consumer web part will be a little bit tricky, but we will handle it, because we will try to document each and everything. Okay, now if you remember, for consumer web part I told you register dynamic data in your brain. Dynamic properties, sorry, my bad. Dynamic data is for the source web part. In the consumer dynamic property, one thing make it clear that we will be fetching the value with the help of web part properties. What are web part properties? When I click on my consumer web part, these are my web part properties. So I will be creating more properties over here. With the help of that I will be fetching it. How? Let's see. Okay, again now I'm in consumer web part ts file. I will import dynamic property Microsoft S3 component base. My implementation is done. I told you I will create a web part property over here, so I'll say I will create title, and it is of type the one which I imported at the top, dynamic property. What would be the type? Dynamic property type would be ilist. And what is ilist? Ilist is the interface which we have, let me remove it from here, again created in the source web part. That is the model which we have created. So now this is done. What I will be doing is, let's go to this slide. What my slide is saying is the next step is add property. I edit the property because I said I will be fetching it using web part properties. Now it is saying let's skip this step for now. It is talking about creating this property in the web part property pane method. This is my method, get property pane configuration. In this I will be creating another property. So this group name is fine. It is ending it over here. Inside group name, group fields, and we will be going inside group fields only because our group is already present. So after label I will go. Okay. What will be the type of my web part property? Over here by default we are getting description. So what is the type of the description? At the top there is an interface for that is string. My type would be dynamic property. I'll say property pane dynamic, and it is giving me dynamic field, but I want set, let's say property pane dynamic, second one, dynamic field set. I will be using the type this dynamic field set. Okay, now it would be an object. Fine. First of all, as you just take a reference, try to take a reference from here. Now I have to mention the label for this property. What will be the label? I'll say select source web part, because you have to connect the web part. After the label, what I have to do, I have to provide the fields for it in this. And again, one more thing, even I don't know, I'm trust me, I'm trying this for the first time. If I have any doubt, let's see what it will do if I'll click F12. Okay, property pane dynamic field set properties, and it is saying it is present in this particular interface. Okay, this is the, okay, I don't know what it is saying. I property pane field, I property dynamic field set properties. Let's go to this interface, and over here I can see few properties. Label, okay, fields, and these two are mandatory. That's what it is giving us an error. Shared configuration I don't want, this is optional. So now again guys, I don't know what I have to write, but this interface is teaching me. So use F12, try to go into the depth of the out of the box method which we are getting. So over here label is done. Now I will use this. This is cross, where it is, let me cross it again. I have to go, I'm so sorry, because now I will be using it extensively. Okay, field will be of type I property pane field, I property pane dynamic field. Okay, property pane dynamic field. Fine. So I'll say field. I have to write fields. Okay, inside this I'll say property pane dynamic field. Okay, and now here it is important, it is saying target property and the property. See over here in my source web part, I said I say in get property definition I define the name. That name I have to give over here, title, and then the label, any label you want to, you can give. I'll say event source. So I might have missed something over here. Let's quickly check. Property pane, it's giving some error, accepts one argument but got three. Okay, fields, this is an array, property pane dynamic field, then one is the title. Now it is fixed. Yes, so now it is fixed. So the important thing is, like in the web part properties, we have to implement this property pane dynamic field set. Over here, this is the label of my property. Select source web part. So automatically what it will do, it will provide you the web parts present in your page. So from here you have to provide select the web part. Next is the fields. So for fields, over here you can see list of property pane dynamic fields to be configured on the dynamic data widget. So list of the fields which you have to configure, you will provide in the fields. Again you can see it is of type I property dynamic field. So go back, just I said fields, it's an array, property pane dynamic field. You provide one field like title is your property, dynamic property, and just the source, select label event source. That's it. So now this is done, this is important. But now how you will pass this to your component file, because in my component file I have this, you can say I am using this list title. This is my REST API. Over here I am hard coding my list title. Now I just want to use it which my source web part is providing. Where it is present, it is present over here in my web part properties. Now this value will be saved in my web part properties. So how I will pass it? Again with the help of properties. So what I will do in the consumer, I will create another property and I will name this property as list title because I will be using it list title. So I'll say list title. What should be the type? Dynamic property. That's the key thing. Dynamic property type iList. Not this one. iList. This is fine. So this is ready. Now this is over here. It will give me error because I have to pass it list title. It's of type dynamic property, and where we are getting the value from here, dynamic property. So I'll say this dot properties dot title. So it should fix the error. If not, then we'll quickly see what's the problem with our code. Okay, we have to save this file. I saved it. This is some typo mistake. I saved it and everything is fine. So till now what I did is I simply created one web part property called title. Okay, dynamic property it is. I imported it. Then in the web part properties I am saying property pane dynamic field set. Select the source web part and let's see how our web part is looking. First of all, maybe that will give you more clarity. So guys, this is my web part and I'm editing it. So over here you can see I'm getting this event source, connect to source. Let's go over here, get property pane configuration, property pane dynamic field set. You said label, select source web part. You are not getting anything. Here is the label, select event source. So it is saying event source. This is the label, and inside this you are getting automatically connect to source. Let's connect to source. Page environment or source. Source is the name of my source web part. Then it is giving you source properties automatically, which you provided over here. Source properties title. If you change something over here, it will get changed over here. So now what will happen whenever I am changing it over here, I connected my web part, automatically it is fetching the value over here. Now we have to just use the value. Now value is present in my value is present now. This dot properties. I have to use it because my web part is connected to source. Now this is passing the title. As soon as it get notified, it is taking this title, going to source web part, saying this I want the value of this title, and you remember the method get property value. Based on that, it is passing. Now let's see how we will use it in my this consumer file, tsx file. So in the consumer tsx file, I'll come to this component did mount method because everything I am doing over here only. See how we can use it. So what I will do, I'll say over here, I'll create one constant default, not default list title, because what I want is list title. So I'll say, first of all, let me take all my properties. I have list title. I want list title equal to this dot props. Fine. This is of type dynamic property. So now what I will do, I will say, if I want to fetch the value from this, I'll say list title dot try get value. And in this, it will give me the value. Why I'm getting this method called try get value? Because its type is dynamic property. That's it. Now it will give me the value. I have to just arrange it the way I want. So what I'll say, I'll create one constant and I will name it as let's say dynamic title. I will name it as dynamic title. Okay, what would be the type of this dynamic title? Again, iList, which I already said. The model I already created in the beginning. It type could be undefined also if it is returning some undefined. And now what I'll say, list title dot try get value. If it is I will use this conditional operator. If it is true, again list title dot try get value. Now if it is false, just give me this default value. I will put this at the top, default list title. This error we will fix. What is this thing? Dynamic title is required but its values never used. So let's use this value over here, dynamic title. So friends, we are getting this error over here. If I hover over it, I can see there is some compatibility issue because I am this dynamic title is of type ilist, and this is also returning of type ilist. That is interface which I created at the top over here. And there's one more thing, the same interface which I created in the source web part also. If I go to source web part, here also I created the same interface. So what I will do, let me try deleting this interface, because I'm considering that interface as a model for this particular project, data model. So I want to use only one interface. So let me delete this one. Okay, this is fine. And here I will try to import the interface which I created in the source web part. I will use that only. Over here it is giving me an error, type title string is not assignable to type ilist. So here you can see in this interface my title is starting with capital T. So I have to change it over here, this property of the interface, and the same thing over here also. So this is also fixed, and over here you can see I think our issue is also fixed over here. So this is also fixed, and over here also I can see this error because I have to use the same title. So this code was already present, as I told you. I already written the common code which I already explained in my earlier videos. And over here if you see what I am doing, I am simply fetching the data from the SharePoint list. What I am doing, I am trying to fetch all the items which is with a list name, which I will pass it over here. So over here in the URL, over here you can see this is the dynamic title. So earlier I was using this default list title, but now I change it to the dynamic list title, which I will be using. So whatever the value from here I will get it. So what I'm saying is list title dot try get value, which it will fetch from the source web part conditional operator I have used. So if it is undefined, it will use the default list title, that is this list title, and if it is having value, it will pass that value. And over here what we are doing, we are simply using this REST API, this props contacts sp http client. If you are not aware about this, you can refer my earlier videos. I have explained each and everything in detail over there. And over here what I'm doing, I'm simply displaying the items in my detail list. What is detail list? This is the Office UI Fabric control, my Fluent UI control, and with the help of state I'm displaying that data over here. Again, if you are not aware about the detail list, this is also I have covered in my earlier video. My gulp server is already running, so let's see how my web part is behaving now. This is my web part. Let me refresh it. Okay, over here it is giving me some error. This thing try get value is undefined. Okay, let me go back and check my code. So my error is saying cannot get the value, try get value of the undefined. If I go back, you can see cannot read property try get value of undefined. That means according to error, list title is undefined. So guys, I have made this mistake knowingly, so that I can explain you what is the use of that particular trick which I'm going to tell you now. Why this error is coming? Because most of you for the first time might might repeat that mistake. So I thought of clarify it by explicitly making the mistake. So what is happening over here, I told you everything we are doing with the help of web part properties. So over here you can see I defined property dynamic field, and name I have given over here title. And if you remember, in the source web part, in the get property definition, I given the property name which I will be passing. Over here, if you go over here, get property definition, ID is title. It is with capital T. If you come to consumer web part, it is with small t. So that is not matching, because my source web part is notifying the consumer web part the title properties is changed. Now you can fetch the value, but when it is passing this particular value, it is not getting mapped over here in the get property value. So that is because we are fetching this error. So I will fix it from here, where I have defined the property value. This is capital T title, and over here if I'll make capital T. Let's see if this will fix our issue of, or there is something else also. Okay, and here also I will change it, this dot properties dot title. Done. So now I will save. Gulp service already running in the background. Now I got the reload message over here, so let me go and refresh my browser again and see if our error got fixed. So still I have got the error, cannot read property, try get value of undefined. Let me again see what is the error. So guys, I still can see this error, so this error still persists. Let's go back to my code. So what I have done, I simply opened this my SharePoint workbench in the Chrome browser instead of my Edge browser. Okay, let me show you, because at few places we still missed, although I corrected it in consumer web part over here in consumer.ts file. I change it from small t to capital T. Okay, but if I go to source web part.ts, over here you can see get property definition is with capital T. So as I told you, we have to use it at each and every place. And if you see over here, get property value, still it is small t. So I will change it to over here. And after this, after my change event, this method get title is triggering when I'm changing my drop down value. So over here also I'm telling the SharePoint framework that property changed, and which property got changed, a wrong name with a title with a small t. And over here also I will change. So guys, please remember, this is a very important step. Whatever the ID you are giving for a property over here in get property definition in source web part, please use the same everywhere. Okay, now this is done and gulp service already running, but still I think we still will receive the same error, because we are missing one thing. If I go to my PPT over here, I mentioned one of this step in the consumer web part, that you have to add this method called get properties metadata, and over here you have to mention this property just to serialize your data. So this method is just to serialize your data. We have to add this also. I will copy it, but first we will see the error and then we will add it. So in that way, we will understand why we are adding any method in a better way. Let me refresh it. Gulp service over, and still error is the same. So I will go back and I will add this method in the consumer web part.ts file, because that is the method which is receiving the data. And over here again, return title, I will change it to capital T. Now this is also done, and this time our error should get fixed. So guys, please do remember this important step. Whatever the value or whatever the ID you are giving for your property in get property definition, use the same. And do not forget to add method get properties metadata. And if you are getting confused with so many errors around on so many steps, don't worry. Before ending the video, we will summarize everything step by step in a sequential manner, and I'm sure that will clear all your doubts. If I refresh this, now my error is fixed. I'm not seeing any error, but still data is also not displayed, but that we will fixed. Okay, and also if I edit this web part over here, why I'm not seeing anything, because over here I can see this connect to source. So I have to establish the connection. I will see these two value. Page environment is by default and source is the web part which is present. So I will connect my consumer web part to the source. Then source properties, we are passing title, so automatically it is coming. Now if I refresh again, value will not come. I will tell you why. So this was expected. Now let me go back to the code. So in the consumer.txt file over here, we are fetching what we are fetching, dynamic list title we are fetching. Okay, and we are passing that to my URL, and that is over here we are passing the data. So what is this dynamic list, dynamic title? It is of type ilist. So over here I will pass that I want title out of it. Okay, and my default value is YouTube content default list title. So if my if my consumer web part is able to fetch data from this source, it will display that value, that is using list title dot try get value. Otherwise it will give you the default data that is from YouTube content. So let's see how it is behaving. So right now it will show me the default data. It will not work. I will tell you why. Let me refresh, and you can see these values are present in my YouTube content list from where it is coming. Now if I go back and select any list, so my data is not getting refreshed. And why this is happening, let me tell you why. You know what is happening is what is the life cycle of the React. So what is happening, first of all, my consumer web part, this method, render method, is getting triggered. From inside, my component is getting called. So control will shift to the component file over here, this method. It will call the constructor. After the constructor, my render method will get called, and after that my component did mount will get called, and that too only once, that is on page loop. So whenever I change, my value in the drop down, my component did mount will not get called. So this will not work. To fix this, I have to use public component did update. This method I have to use. I will put one alert in this just to make you understand. Component did update will run, and inside this I will run alert component did mount. And guys, I will do one more thing over here. I will check the value also which will receive from the source. This dot props dot list title dot try get value. This is another way, and this way also you can use directly list title. So, and same thing I will do in my component did update also. Now let's see where we are getting the value of my value from the source web part. Wait for the cursor to get finished. So guys, we are almost done. Now we will be able to see the value from the source web part. It just we have to do the last few steps just to display the data properly. Basic things we have already done. I will refresh. See over here, component did mount, and it is giving undefined. Why it is giving undefined? Because we have configured our web part to pass the value only on drop down change event, so not on onload. That's why it is undefined. Component did update, and in component did update also it is undefined. So that's fine. That is what I was expecting. Now I changed the value from the source web part, converted form. Component did update got triggered, and I can see this converted form. What is happening is the moment I am changing the value in the drop down in the source web part. This is my source web part. Drop down change event is getting triggered. This is calling list title change, and from here through properties I am calling method called pass list title. What is the pass list title? Over here I through pass list title, sorry, I am calling this method through properties called pass list title. If I go to properties, pass list title, I am calling this method over here, pass list title, this dot get title. So this method is getting called, and what it is doing, it is saving the value over here list title and notifying the SharePoint framework that property got changed. This is not happening on onload, only on drop down change event. As soon as SharePoint framework came to know that property in the source web part got changed, it will notify the consumer web part. Consumer web part has already subscribed. These all things are happening internally, and it will call the get property value method over here, and based on the property which we are passing from the over here web part properties. So from the web part properties we are passing this value title. So it will compare over here. Okay, so over here it will compare get property value. It will see property ID is title, and it will return this value to the consumer web part, and that will happen only in the component did update, because component did will update will get triggered. It will always get triggered on my drop down change event or anything get updated in the component, but my component did mount get triggered only once, that is on the onload. So now I could have directly wrote this code in the component did mount, but I want to explain you each and every concept. That's why I have done all these things. Now what I have to do is I have to shift my code from component did mount to component did update. But then we will face one issue. What will happen if I shift all this code as it is from the component did mount to component did update? What will happen over here? we are calling this REST API. So this was what this REST API will do. Inside this we are calling this REST API, and inside that we are updating the state. So what will happen whenever we will update the state, update method will get triggered again, and it will go into an infinite loop, and it will your page will get stuck. So again I will tell you, if I call this REST API over here, so if I shift everything from here, for example, I will start from here and till here. Sorry, I will leave it here also, and I will copy this code here. Component did update. I will remove the alert now. Okay, I will remove the alert for the component did mount. I will keep the alert for this so that you will come to know that component did update is getting triggered. So nothing will happen till here. Let me show you also. But the moment I will put this REST API, it will call this and it will set the state. The moment it will set the state, it will update the component did, it will call the component did update again. It will again come inside that method. Again, it will set the state again, component did update will get called, and it will put you into an infinite loop, into a deadlock like situation. To overcome that, we will use certain parameter which comes by default with component did update, and then it will fix our error. So let me quickly show you. I want to show you each and every small minute details through hands-on. Component did update undefined, so that's fine. Now let me put this code as well inside component did update from here till here. Control C. Same code I'm using over here, and now you will see an infinite loop. Okay, now I will refresh. Component did update undefined, component did update undefined, and you can see this infinite loop. Although it is returning me undefined. Why? Because as I told you, my web source web part will pass property only on drop down change event, but you can see this undefined. So to fix this, how we will fix this? Let me go back over here. See, till here it's fine. It just I have to see that a changing state should happen in a way that it should not result into an infinite loop. In this source.tsx file, just for the sake of showing you, I will write it over here. Component did update, and over here you can see it has parameters called like previous props, that is read only, previous state read only, and snapshot. So we will use this parameter which will give us like previous property and previous state. Don't get confused, let me show you. So I'll jump to consumer.txt file. Over here I will mention these parameters which I will use. So I will say previous props, it will be of type I consumer properties. Fine. Then previous state, I consumer state. So these two I need. I don't need that snapshot parameter. I will use these two. So what previous property will do? So previous properties, what it will do, even we don't need this previous properties, we need only this previous state. So we will use this previous state. So what previous state will do? So whenever on my component, whenever my component is loading, my component did mount is running, and it is setting a state over here called items, and it is setting it to titles. Okay, and I want to do one more thing over here. Apart from items, I have one more state called list title, just to save this list title, and I will make it to default list title. So now what will happen? My web part will load, component did mount will trigger, and it will set the state of list title to the default list title value. Sorry, instead of default I will set dynamic title, because this is what we are fetching. It will set the state to the dynamic title. Okay, So for example, over here, initially it will be blank. So the dynamic title would be the YouTube content. So what will happen? I will go over here, and inside this I will say if previous state dot, and I will use my state in which I saved the initial value in the component date mount method. So I will use that. So I will say previous state dot list title should not equal to which value, that over here we will get the updated value, that is the dynamic title. Okay, and inside this I will put all my rest call and the setting of the states, and this will fix my problem. So what is happening is my component did mount the component. So what will happen, my component did update will get triggered on drop down change. It will come over here, it will take the previous state of the list title what it is, or you can say it will fetch the list title which is my state. In this value set is YouTube content, it will check dynamic title which would be different. For example, event, it won't be saved, it will execute everything. Then I will set the state again, component did update will get triggered. Over here now the state is inside this. Also I will change update the state, that is the list title to dynamic list title, dynamic title. Okay, so now over here again it will come, this time the list title state is event. So it will fetch previous state dot list title event, dynamic title was event only, so it will not get executed, and this way we will avoid the deadlock. Now I will go and see, it should work. Over here I have to see not equal to one more. Now I will try again. This was a small typo mistake. There is one problem over here. Inside my URL, what I am passing is dynamic title, but over here, we just saw when I was simply passing this value, we were directly getting the value. So no need to use this dot title. I will directly use this, and this should fix our issue. But inside component did mount, I have to use this dynamic title because my try get value is undefined, so I have to use that. Again I will tell you why I have to use that over here, because over here, if you saw, this is default list title and this is an interface. So my in component date mount, this value will be undefined, so I am fetching the value from here default list title, which is an type interface. So I have to use the property of the interface, that is title, to fetch the value. But in my case of component did update, I will be getting the value from the over here list title dot dry get value, and it is directly saving the value in the dynamic title. So I will be directly using that dynamic title. So this is fine. Let me refresh, and I am hopeful that this will fix my issue. I will refresh my page. Component did update undefined, and you can see our error got fixed. Now let me change the value over here, composed loop, component did update. You can see directly I'm getting the value composed loop, so I will directly use it in my URL parameter. Okay, component did update, composed loop, and you can see over here my consumer web part is consuming the value. It is automatically getting updated, and it will run 2 or 3 times. And now through this we are able to get through our infinite loop. Now just for a seamless experience, I will remove this alert, because now I think you must have understood the concept. If not, definitely now I'm going to summarize this. Just let me show you again, and then you will understand each and everything. Because while summarizing, I will go sequentially with each and every step to configure these connected web parts. So this is fine. Let me refresh this. We will not get any alert. So you can see. Okay, and if in your case your web part is not working, please do check the connections over here. It should be connected. Okay, now if I change the web part over here, let's say first FC, see how seamless it is. It is working. It is very responsive. Events, immediately I'm getting the value. If I'll select anything, style library, in style library it is a document library, and we don't have the title column inside that. That's why it is blank over here, because here I can show you in my URL. Okay, let me get by title. This is the slash items over here, and simply pushing the title only. So if title is blank, I will not get the value. And if I select any list, it will simply work. YouTube content, I'll get the result. Learning is a library, I know that. Let me see with flag. Let me see with this app data, it's a library. So with list it will work. Database is a list, it is having 35,000 items, and for that you can see it is directly working. So database is a list, so it is fetching the value from here. So guys, over here I am successfully able to demonstrate the connected web parts. Now very quickly I will summarize the entire concepts. So this is connected web part concepts. First, there are two web parts: source, which will provide the value; consumer, which will consume the value. Whenever the source web part, will change the value which is intended to pass, it will notify the SharePoint framework that the value is changed, it is updated. That consumer web part will, fetch that value and it will use it. So this is the functionality in the background. How we will implement it in this source web part? Remember dynamic data, we will use dynamic data. So what we will do, we will go to the source web part.ts file. Inside that, first thing is, in the init method you can register that web part as a source web part. You will create one init method and you will say this dot context dot dynamic data source manager dot initialize source, and this means this particular component. So now your web part is registered as a dynamic as a source web part which will provide the data. Again, another important thing which you have to do, you have to initialize your web part class with interface called dynamic data callable. The moment you will do this, you will start getting an error, and you have to write two methods called get property definition, get property value. Inside get property definition, it is very simple. You have to simply provide the constant value, or I can say hard coded value of your property which you will pass. It's a name, but make sure you use the same name across your source web part as well as the consumer web part while consuming this value. So if this is title, over here also you will use the same. In the get property value, what I am doing, I am simply passing the value. That's it. I will say return this dot list title, because my consumer web part will call this particular method called get property value. Because my consumer web part will call this particular method called get property value, and I will use this to pass it. So get property value is done, get property definition is done. I have steps are, number one step, you can say just extend your web part class with dynamic data callable interface. Import, I'm not counting in these steps. Imports you can automatically do it. Dynamic data callable, extend your class, implement your class with this particular interface, write get property definition, get property value. Third step is on init, register it as a initialized source, that this is the source. Once this is done, so these three are the basic steps. Apart from that, you will decide in your scenario how you will pass the value. It could be on load, it could be on click. In my case, it was drop down change event. So simply I went to my drop down change event over here. Okay, and from here through properties, use of properties, I called this method which is present in my TS file called get title. And in this I am passing the value, and I am notifying my SharePoint framework that notify property change. Source web part, simple 4 steps, and this is done. I will come to consumer web part. In consumer web part, like in source web part, you will remember dynamic data. In consumer web part, you will remember dynamic property. Through property, we will consume the value. So what I will do, immediately I will create one property called dynamic property. It should be the same name which I have used in my source. In get property definition, type will be dynamic property, and this is the data model, a simple .NET concept. Fine. After that, you will come to your property, get property pane configuration. You will create a property using property pane dynamic field set. Inside that, one label, select source web part, and inside fields you will say property pane dynamic field, and you will tell this is my title, and it should be the same name. Again, I'm saying which you define in your get property definition, and again you will label it event source. I can show you again how it is looking. See over here what we have defined. Property pane over here, property pane dynamic field set, select source web part. So nowhere it is appearing over here. What it is, it is starts appearing from the fields. Property label event source, so event source is coming, and automatically the moment you will use this property pane dynamic field label is the event source, automatically it will come connect to source properties, and it will fetch the source property from here. This is done. Third step is serializing, which in my case I intentionally skipped it just to make you understand. In this case, you are telling you are just serializing your data that you will receive in the form of string, dynamic property type string. So these three steps are there. Consumer web part, initially when you will implement it, it will look complex, but it has only three steps: define property, go to property pane configuration, and just serializing it. Now how you will pass the value? Now you will get the value from the properties. Simply use properties and pass this dot properties dot title. You will pass it in your component file. In the component file you have to use it. How you will use it? This dot properties, your property name dot try get value. That's it. It won't be available in the component did mount. In my case, because I trigger it on drop down change event, if I trigger it on onload, it would be available. So I consume it inside component did mount method directly using list title dot try get value, and rest are the concepts. Just to avoid the deadlock in the component did update method, I used I simply compare the previous state with the current value. If they are different, execute it, else skip it. With this I reached to the end of this video, that is SPFx connected web part. I hope you understood it and you will be able to implement it at your end, and it would be useful for you. So guys, thank you for watching this video. Please like and share the video and subscribe to the channel to get notification for our upcoming videos. If you have any doubts regarding this video or any of our previous video, you can reach out to us through our official email contactdstechmirror@gmail.com. I have created a group over Facebook called Modern SharePoint. You can join that group, and also you can follow me on Twitter. You can find my Twitter handle below in the description box. I will add it. You can follow me to get all the updates from the Office 365 world. Thank you. Much love. Keep learning.